What's up, Angie? Couldn't hold back. This one couldn't wait. That's a big thank you and shout out to DJ Pooh, AKA-DJ-Brixx. Thank you for the original music. I wasn't able to tag you through OBS stream, so as soon as this is complete, we'll have a link directly to you, my man. Thank you, brother. Alright, let's do the fade, let's do the thing. What the hell happened here? Alright, fade out, ba-dow. Well, how do you do? Progressive Patriot here, and based on the last poll that we did, I wanted to be true to my word. The vote was overwhelmingly for Big Pharma and personal experience with addiction. While I have big plans for, well, aside from the individuals that I announced I'll be speaking with who were dealt a bad hand, and one has a civil suit against the very great state of Florida, or specifically this county. Before that happens, I'm going to do another deep dive into CPS. And before that is what I promised here. So I compiled a few things together. And I also learned some like new facts, but it's the same old family. I suppose since I'm going to share this content, I don't know if I should be mindful that this is the content from another channel, and I worry about, copyright strikes or anything like that. And hello and welcome to all of you. And I know, thanks for bearing with me, Millbilly Bass Girl, Brennan, Shamrock, Jan, and Angie. I know no schedule and just popping on must be a little chaotic if you're actually looking forward to when the lives occur. So I'll be working on that at some capacity. I'm going to take a risk. This is one of the most important things that I'll ever talk about because it's so personal. It's so close to home. It unalived so many of my friends and some of my family. And the personal anecdotes and experiences of what a scumbag I was when I was an addict, completely and nothing more than selfish, will haunt me for all eternity. I've learned to forgive myself. It's not easy, especially when some of the things I did are there's no way to make it right, like pawning my family's precious jewelry. My mother's a jeweler in Colombia. When she was younger, she brought it over here. I lost a ring passed from my grandfather to my father in a stupid fight when I was wasted. So, alright, a big reason, let me play with the imagery real quick. A big reason that I focus so much on this specific family is because they were the ones that owed Purdue, which is the company that put out all those precious little oxys and roxys that destroyed millions of us. Millions. And the closest thing we got to justice, they removed their names from a museum. This is the different rules that are played time and time again with the ultra-wealthy, elite, politically connected, and what have you. I really don't want to appear like I just don't like wealthy people. That is not the case. But it seems like just like absolute power corrupts absolutely, money seems to do the same damn thing, and I struggled to find examples where it has not. There's a certain party or a certain amount of billionaires or even millionaires. They call themselves I hope I'm not getting this wrong, plutocrats, which are billionaires and millionaires that are for and I know this is not always a popular notion, but they're advocating for paying a little extra to society. But that's their personal decision, and that's what distinctively makes it different than just taking. And just bear that in mind as we deep dive into this family that has never apologized. I just learned doing the research here that families of victims and survivors got to actually see them and speak and share their personal testimony, and the families did not respond. They just listened. And to this day, not an apology, not a single arrest. They're just publicly scrutinized. Yet so wealthy and disconnected, they made over $10 billion on our own American lives and children. They were marketing towards children. Remember little Oxycontin plush toys and little Oxycontin chewables? And never forget, we're the only first world country that allows those that produce the medicine for the sick to be advertised straight into our homes. Why are we the only country that has such a high incentive? Now, you could look at that like, oh, it's better for my freedom of choice. Actually, it's a little backwards. You learn of the options from the physicians that are invested in care and make the recommendations. Here, we go in as a consumer, and we already think we have it figured out. So it's a little backwards here. All right? One of the greatest countries in the world, forever and a day, but we are far from perfect. So, okay, here's where the risk begins, okay? I'm going to cite fair use. Thank you to the Cold Fusion channel. Cold Fusion, big channel, so big thanks. I'm citing fair use. You have the greatest compilation and breakdown that I've been able to find that's not copywritten. So let's take a little dive. I haven't seen more than 2 minutes of this footage.
We are in the middle of an epidemic. An epidemic. In fact,
possible trigger warning, by the way.
Public health epidemic in our history.
I'm gonna get the audio.
8 members of the Sackler family caused much of the opioid epidemic. And the case is shining a spotlight on the powerful family behind the drug maker.
They were all hell-bent on becoming super rich.
Imagine a medical industry that's supposed to keep a nation healthy, but becomes so completely corrupt that it causes an epidemic. This has become a reality in the United States, where opioids have caused just under 50,000 deaths per year, according to recent figures. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Countless other lives have been destroyed through addiction. In the United States,
still happening to this day, the incentive of, getting paid first and ask questions, show concerns later, still exists. There's just a bit more bureaucracy and red tape to ensure that people that need the drug get the drug. But I still have this eternal battle within my mind, knowing what it can do. Is it really worth it? Is the medicine worse than the affliction or sickness?
Drug overdoses are the leading.
And I'm still on Suboxone. Very, very small pieces. I have one of my mods. Thank you for the information you've been giving me. Sublocade is apparently something that can be injected once, and that's it for a whole month. And you wean down from that. It's not easy, and it's a battle every day.
Cause of death in people under 50. That's a lot to take in, but imagine if most of this tragedy was caused by one secretive family working behind the scenes.
There they are.
This is a reality. That family's name is Sackler. The Sackler family is not only partly responsible for the epidemic, but has also made a...
Partly. Okay, I guess we're just gonna remember that yes, there were government officials that were letting this all happen. So, okay, I'll remind myself of that because they were nearly wholeheartedly the ones pushing against this with their ties. Absolutely, that's right. They had political ties.
Multi-billion-dollar empire from it. You may not know about them, but you've surely heard of OxyContin before. Welcome to the story of how billionaires and doctors became the drug dealers that caused an epidemic.
You are watching.
Meanwhile, a citizen out there that gets caught, I got caught with 4 Vicodin, and that was a felony. Okay, they get caught serving $10 billion worth. They have their names removed from a museum. That's the equivalent of justice for those that don't play by the rules and that have all the money in the world.
Cold Fusion TV.
Thank you, Cold Fusion. Thank you. Please do not strike me down.
I hated sticking my fingers. Then
we have a... Well, I hope you don't mind that I'm helping the monetization. Okay. The
opioid epidemic in the United States was caused by a variety of factors, but one of the main ones is the involvement of the Sackler family and their infamous opioid painkiller, OxyContin. In 2017, when over 100 people per day were dying, President Trump declared the opioid crisis a national emergency.
100 people a day. For how many days? Because that went on for nearly a decade.
Here's the problem. Patients are often given strong painkillers when in hospital for surgery or chronic pain. While the drugs are life-enabling for many patients to avoid excruciating pain from injury or otherwise, many fall into addiction cycles from withdrawals. Some
cut
people
off 3 months without any so much of a word and one refill, and then I was left in the trailer parks. It's like they knew what they were doing.
graduate from prescription pharmaceuticals onto cheaper and more potent alternatives like heroin or fentanyl. The cases and causes come from...
And yes, I tried H before, twice in one day, and I remember my instant reaction was, I prefer the Roxys. That was legit my reaction. I was like, yeah, whoa, this is quick and all that. This is when I, of course, left the state of Florida to go visit my family in New Jersey. Made a fool of myself. And I'll own that forever. The great shame. I think that's the last time I saw my cousins that I grew up with. I like raised them. And they saw this monster eating dinner at the restaurant. My uncle, my aunt, they knew something was wrong. I was very sick. I was like dope sick. Something was dirty with that fucking H, and I was a mess. And that's like a scar that's hard to forget. And I still carry that shame with me. And I really, honestly and truly, as much as I miss my cousins, our relationship has not been the same since that. And I think there's something deep and psychologically scarring about that. And I need to reach out and break that threshold. Break this wall of shame, or it's going to haunt me until I die. Sorry, thinking out loud.
Far and wide. But research indicates that there is a strong correlation between regions of high opioid prescription rates and high overdose rates.
I mean, if you look at it, 4 of 5 injectable drug users started getting opioids, whether it be OxyContin, prescription or non-prescription pill taking. So there is a direct correlation between the two.
Annually, more than 214 million prescriptions for opioid pain have been given out, with more than 11 million
Remember the
people using
commercials
medication.
that promised these
But
were
how
not
did this
addictive?
problem get so catastrophic? Enter
2000,
the Sacklers.
2003 to 2014. And here's the
Sacklers
family.
pushed OxyContin to everyday people who had little use for the drug. They corrupted the entire supply chain, employing armies of sales reps, paying off doctors, lobbying for favorable regulation, and
All
making
legal.
billions while masses fell into devastating addiction. They didn't care much for the addictive properties of their drugs.
There's
They
the
were more
reality.
concerned with their bottom line.
That's right.
Their name is everywhere, yet not many people know about them. The Sackler family have invested a substantial portion of their $14 billion net worth into many museums, art galleries, and universities. The world-famous Louvre Museum in Paris has a Sackler wing. Kate Middleton was stunned when she opened the Sackler courtyard in the Victoria and Albert Museum, which consists of 11,000 handmade porcelain tiles. London's famous Gothic church, Westminster Abbey.
So our deaths went to shine up and beautify antique museums. That's what our bloodshed was, for bottomless greed and for the luxury of materialism and antiquing. Well done, America. Thank you, Sackler family. Thank you, politicians and leaders and doctors, and for the Hippocratic oath that was taken to ensure that we would all see ourselves to an early grave, and for every single person I lost. Thank you.
Has a window named after the Sacklers. While the family is happy to put their name on any prestigious institution that will receive their money, it's a name that is far removed from their golden product, OxyContin. The reason why will soon be very obvious. So to understand the Sacklers in full, we must first look at the Sackler story. The story of the Sacklers starts in 1952
Maybe
when
I'll
three
learn
psychiatrist
something.
brothers, Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond, purchased a small pharmaceutical...
Oh, good old Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond. They just want to destroy the lives of blue-collar workers, do they?
company called Purdue. Together, they co-authored over 100 research papers on the biochemistry of mental illness.
Oh, I
Arthur
remember.
Sackler doubled as an advertising pioneer in pharmaceuticals. Perhaps by using his research papers as leverage, he was the first to convince the Journal of the American Medical Association to run an ad brochure in color.
The same dudes that were responsible for Valium busting into our lives in, what was it when it was really popular? Was it the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on? So yeah, benzodiazepines and opiates. Fantastic family you have there.
Arthur went on to make Valium the first drug to pass 100 million sales. He did this by marketing it as a drug to cover all kinds of ailments with a made-up term he called psychic tension. Previously, that kind of...
They make up the illness, and then you get to say you have this made-up thing, psychic tension, you get your Valium. They came up with, and they continue to, throughout the opioid addiction, come up with, like, phantom pain and stuff like that. And a lot of us still have it programmed, like, there is pain after surgery. I have, sciatic nerve damage. Sometimes it feels like a bolt of lightning hits me in the ribs, but they came up with so many terms that are not medically backed just to push their drug.
Drug was strictly only for anxiety. So with the introduction of the invented idea of psychic tension, it could be prescribed to a much wider market. Almost anyone could fit the symptoms, not just anxiety sufferers. By this stage, Sackler was inducted into the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame. During the 1980s, a recent movement in medicine was taking place. It was called hospice. The hospice sector takes care of the terminally ill and end-of-life patients.
Make you nice and docile as you await your death.
Around this time, the Sackler's company, Purdue, would release a morphine-based pill called MS-Contin that could help cancer patients sleep. In the hospice market, addiction wasn't an issue because the patients would soon pass. Purdue would take this concept one step
Welcome to
further.
all survivors here. It is great to see you.
Use.
What's up, Indy?
Unfortunately, MS-Contin would be the precursor to the drug that would help create an epidemic. In the United States, MS-Contin became the benchmark for pain relief among cancer patients. During the 1980s, several papers and articles claimed that the link between opioids and addiction was minimal and previously overstated. A letter published to the New England Journal of
Because the think tanks that were providing the resources and the data were all bought and paid for and completely compromised by the Sackler family.
Medicine stated that the risk of addiction was less than 1%. Even though this letter was later retracted by the author, it didn't stop over 600 citations of the letter in medical journals. The misinformation had already spread, and it was difficult to stop.
No less of a chance, actually.
Advertising genius and co-founder of Purdue, Arthur Sackler, had a nephew named Richard. Richard would later become the president of Purdue, but got his start as a research scientist in the company. Richard would constantly be brainstorming ideas, trying to find new uses for MS-Contin. Much like his uncle Arthur, he was heavily interested in the commercial and marketing side of the business. Purdue's former executive director of product management recalled that Richard didn't always wait for the research results. Richard Sackler would later become the president of the company in 1999 and co-chair in 2003. His uncle and father became the co-CEOs of Purdue. Within Purdue, Richard was an avid micromanager. He would send out bulletins which halfway through read, "If you're reading this, call my secretary," and he would leave secret passwords in the text. Based on which sales reps called the secretary and delivered the password, Richard would know exactly who was reading the bulletins and who wasn't. During the 1990s, the company realized that they needed to do something about MS-Contin. The patent was set to expire by the end of the decade. In addition, the use of morphine as an end-of-life medication stigmatized the drug from being more widely available. The company moved to make a new drug called OxyContin, with the active ingredient oxycodone replacing the morphine. Many doctors falsely believed that oxycodone was weaker than morphine. The truth was, the active ingredient in OxyContin, oxycodone,
50 times stronger than morphine. Oh my god, man. They knew this. Why would the doctors be ill-informed as to the medication they were going to prescribe to millions of people? Come on, this is not an oversight.
In fact, 50% stronger than morphine. Later, in an unpublished study by Purdue in 1999, the company found that the addiction rate was 13%, not 1%. The FDA even approved the claim that OxyContin's delayed absorption would reduce the probability of abuse. The FDA examiner who was involved in the approval of this claim left the FDA shortly and within 2 years had accepted a role at Purdue. Sadly,
so check this out. The FDA, the Food, Drug, and Administration, they are leaving their position from the FDA, the public service, for the greater good and all that, to go to the private sector. And with all the contacts and insider info that they have, they carry that to the privatized company where there is no checks and balances or tests to get things approved, as there is, I suppose, with the FDA that does allow a certain amount of fecal matter to be in your foods. Yeah, those same standards carry over into getting pills out to the millions and seeing to it that we are born, bred, addicted, and dead.
This move hints at corruption. In 2015, Purdue was granted FDA approval to market the drug to children as young as 11. Almost
11
immediately after
years old.
OxyContin was released, the cases of addiction became apparent. But rather than admit their drug was addictive, the company simply blamed people for not taking the drug as directed. Even Purdue themselves had to fire one of their secretaries after she became addicted to OxyContin. So the question has to be asked, why was
That's right, and she was given an NDA to sign and a settlement. So she was good. Screw the rest of us, though.
use and abuse of OxyContin so widely spread? Well, it wasn't by accident. The company knew exactly what they were doing.
Drinking warm water before
for
bed
crying out
erases years
loud.
of damage to teeth and gums.
You
People
know
are
what? It's
reversing
good to
decay.
get my taste of my own medicine.
Purdue's strategy for marketing their new drug, OxyContin, began in 1995. First, the company focused the drug on the same market as MS-Contin, cancer patients. The move was made to win wide regulatory acceptance and the integration of the drug into medical programs. The company began their targeted advertisements on health professionals. During this stage, sales...
Oh my god, I can't believe they have the actual footage. The Sackler family went through great bounds to eliminate this evidence, and I remember there was one whistleblower that held on to it for, roughly 10 years or so, and released it finally 10 years after all the death, damage, destruction. And finally, the public got their hands on these very videos. I can't believe that I found the originals here in this video. Thank you, Cold Fusion TV.
Representatives were encouraged to lie about the addictive nature of the drug.
That our best, strongest pain medicines are the opioids, but these are the same drugs that have a reputation for causing addiction and other terrible things.
Yes.
Now,
I
in
talk
fact,
like this and you'll believe me.
the rate of addiction amongst pain patients who are treated by doctors is much less than 1%. They don't wear out, they go on working, they do not have serious medical side effects, and so these drugs, which I repeat are our best, strongest pain medications, should be used much more than they are for patients in pain.
You can tell I'm scholarly and trustworthy and intellectual because I talk like this. Buzz Killington, trust everything that I say.
Then things got really dirty. Purdue then began paying off all the links in the supply chain. Distributors were guaranteed rebates, pharmacists were given refunds, and patients were given coupons for starter supplies. Academia also got their share in grants. Medical journals were even making money from advertising the drug. Politicians were given campaign donations from both Purdue and the Sackler family. But the most important link in the whole chain was the...
How easy would it be to FOIA request and find out every single politician that took money from the Sackler family? That's got to be easier to obtain than, say, the flight logs, right? Tell me this is public knowledge, because I think they're indebted to be found out. I haven't heard of any political fallout from people that accepted money from the Sackler family. I've only heard about the Sackler family coming under fire, and the extensive justice that has been seen is just the removal of their last name from a fucking museum. That's it. Where is everybody else?
the doctors.
Why do I only know the Sackler family name?
They were the ones who used their discretion on what to prescribe patients. Purdue had speaking events where doctors would be flown in to so-called seminars, which were essentially golfing trips. Thousands of clinicians were paid to speak at conferences on the company's behalf.
I spoke to one of these
Prominent doctors
clinicians.
on the Purdue payroll played down the effects of opioids, calling them a gift from nature, and stated that the notion that opioids
Synthetically
caused
made
addiction
gift from
was
nature.
a medical myth. During a 9-year stretch from 2006 to 2015, Purdue and other drug manufacturers in the industry had spent almost $900 million in political payments and lobbying. Purdue lobbied and encouraged regulations that required doctors to ask patients to rate their pain on a scale of 1 to 10. This gave them a more quantifiable and tangible reason to prescribe
Nonsense
opioids.
chart.
The company was trying to make OxyContin a viable treatment for non-cancer patients. An excerpt from Esquire, who did a piece on the Sacklers, reads, "The company rebranded pain relief as a sacred right, a universal narcotic entitlement available not only to the terminally ill, but to every American." By 2001,
That worked out well.
annual OxyContin sales had surged past $1 billion.
This is where roughly I lost 10 years of my life.
Business was booming. In the 5-year period between 1996 and 2001,
80% of my
in the
friends.
United States, OxyContin grew from 300,000 prescriptions to almost 6 million. Opioid abuse cases began rising to the surface, and studies would show direct correlations between
hi,
the
it's
location
our
of
state,
cases
my state.
and the volume of opioid prescriptions in that area.
75% of the fatalities were pill related.
Purdue even targeted poor areas with high labor work. The higher instances of workplace
They started with the mining towns.
injury led to high uses of OxyContin. The company also recorded information about prescription quantities that individual doctors were writing. Sadly, this was so that the sales reps would have a better idea of which doctors to target. Like casinos targeting clients that would spend the most, Purdue was targeting doctors that would prescribe the most.
People trust their doctor and they think that the doctor is prescribing things appropriately and monitoring them appropriately, and they think that the bottle says take it in such and such a way that it's perfectly okay to do that.
It is now possible to find regions in the country where the amount of prescriptions is more than the actual population of the region. Doctors would be arrested.
They get rid of the pushers, people that took the Hippocratic Oath, but the real demons responsible for everything get nothing and never had to apologize.
In the hundreds for running clinics which prescribe pills to patients without a legitimate reason. These were often called pill mills.
Yeah, I used to frequent them.
Purdue company.
You know, there were some doctors that would solicit sex with women, and, well, I guess any addict that was willing to just give their body for their addiction. This was a well-known thing, and which doctors were willing to do that, and which locations, and pill mill. There was like it was like a party outside on those lines. Everybody was giving each other whatever. Hey, you want a Xanax? You want methadone? I remember it was like a wild party of zombies, and it was so frightening to see. But I mean, that was the world I was living in, so it was natural to me. Only in hindsight can I truly see the evil and the blood that was being spilled in the name of greed.
Not only knew what they were doing, but they were happy about it. The company's memos between sales reps read, "Dollars, dollars, dollars. It's bonus time in the neighborhood." Some of the better sales reps were earning six-figure commissions, with the company paying out $40 million in bonuses in 2001. But for the Sackler family and Purdue, things weren't going to stay so rosy.
Oh.
By this stage, there was mounting criticism of OxyContin, but Purdue still managed to make things even worse. The effects of OxyContin were supposed to last 12 hours, enough for a good night's rest. However, often the effects are only present for 8 hours. Now, Purdue could have done one of two things. Increase the frequency.
I got to the point where it lasted about 2 hours. At the rate I was taking blues, I would easily rail, smoke, snort, like 20 in a span of 3 days, which was roughly, if I remember the calculations, it was about maybe $200, I don't know, roughly 20 per a single pill.
Frequency of the dose, or increase the dosage and increase the potential for addiction. They did the latter. Sales reps were strictly instructed to inform doctors to increase the dosage amounts instead of the frequency. This created the perfect cycle for addiction. The increased dosage would make the patient feel the effects of withdrawal for a short period, and then they would have to take another pill to put them at ease again. This led patients down the slope of being prescribed more than they needed. As their tolerances grew, they fell deeper into addiction.
Every night on the news, you'd hear of someone dying in the state or in other states because of OxyContin. And it was so addictive. And they knew that. Pharmaceuticals knew that.
To bring this home, I have to show you the real impact of opioid withdrawal from the inside. With this, you can gain an empathetic view and understand why so many people don't make it out.
Family time is something
needles.
Travis Reeder does not take for granted. The Johns Hopkins University bioethics professor soaks up every moment he can. That's because 2 years ago, prescription opioids stole a chapter of his life. 2015, a serious motorcycle accident left Travis with a crushed foot. He would have 6 surgeries to fix it, including a transplant from his thigh, requiring large amounts of pain medication.
I was at a follow-up doctor's appointment with the initial trauma surgeon, the guy who saved the foot, and he's the one who's asked me about my pain level and my drugs, and he's like, "Oh, you're on a lot of opioids. You probably need to think about getting off them."
Travis says his doctor suggested he begin weaning off of the drugs over 4 weeks. He says 3 days in, he was going through serious withdrawal.
I felt like I got the flu. My temperature kind of went haywire.
You feel like your blood is on fire.
Didn't sleep very well.
She watched him get worse
Cold sweat.
every day.
Uncontrollable crying,
Desperation,
very often.
anxiety,
He
depression,
would just burst into tears, like,
irrational anger.
He couldn't sleep.
Travis reached out to more than a dozen of his doctors. Some told him to take stool softeners and drink lots of water. but no one could tell him how to get out of the withdrawal hell he was in.
I'm really
You know,
in
our
trouble.
generation is really the pioneers of surviving. So just look at all the things. COVID and how it was handled, I'd say. The great opiate epidemic, which as far as I'm concerned is still happening. And what have we really seen as an improvement? My DOC, the Blues, the Roxys, they're off the market. OxyContin is still everywhere and highly sought. Thankfully, I'm not in an area where I see it every damn day. But really, what has changed? Regulation. I'm sure the people, just different people, are profiteering.
Here, I'm feeling really bad. So, well, if it's that bad, go back on the drugs.
Travis says he is not anti-opioids and believes they do have a place, but doctors need to prescribe them with a plan.
The failure was in not following up, never telling me.
Oh, look, the
what to look
system
forward
failed us
to.
again.
In my experience, opioid withdrawal was the worst feeling I've ever had, hands down. I have vivid memories of being sick in my bed, sweating with the covers on, and freezing with the covers off. I was constantly sick. I vomited
I had the worst
every
nightmares.
single morning. It's something
Most
that I
violent
would never want
nightmares.
to go back to.
You can die, straight up. Your heart can explode for not having it, you can die. Because when you don't have it, your blood pressure goes up. That is why a lot of people's heart feels like it's pounding out of their chest when they have the withdrawal symptoms. And if I didn't have them, the hair on my head hurt.
Yeah.
Not only that, withdrawal symptoms, you're going to be throwing up. You're going to be vomiting. You're going to have cold chills. You're going to have hot flashes. You're going to not be able to sleep because you're going to have restless legs. Your legs are going to be moving all over the place. If this is your legs, this is what they're going to be doing because you can't stand to be in your own skin.
When I'd run out, I'd stay in bed for 2 days and I wouldn't eat. I couldn't sleep, or I'd try to sleep. And I'd wait for that call, and that ringtone still haunts me. And that is the only moment I would jump up out of bed with a half-open rib cage that connects to my lungs and climb a huge brick wall way taller than me and throw my bike over it and go and get what I knew was the only thing that could get me well.
And that is exactly what it feels like to withdraw. Exactly. You're also going to have probably anxiety attacks, maybe even panic attacks. Your
Seizures.
face is flushing, you might get scared, so you start hyperventilating and things like that.
There was no counseling along the way. I was never told that dependence was going to be a problem, right? And then at the end, no one knew how or was able or willing to appropriately wean me off.
So why wasn't anyone doing anything about this? Well, soon people did.
We the people, remember that. It wasn't legislators, it wasn't politicians that were noticing and cared. There weren't mayors, where were the heroes?
As time
It
went
was
on,
us.
Purdue would go on to face many class action lawsuits in regard to their practices with the drug.
Yeah,
Often the company settled,
mini
awarding
Holocaust.
plaintiffs millions. In 2004, Purdue was sued for deceptive marketing, as the drugs were meant to last 12 hours, but lasted much less. The company settled the suit for $10 million, sealing the case
Chump
under
change to them.
confidentiality and admitting no wrongdoing or changing any practices. Purdue always avoided any Sacklers testifying under oath. They always reached a settlement just as they were going to be called upon. In 2007, the company faced a suit from the federal government in which Purdue was charged for a criminal felony of purposefully pushing misconceptions about OxyContin. Purdue acknowledged that they knew about the misconceptions doctors had about their drug and actively exploited it for profits.
Because you sowed that misinformation out there to the very people that were going to profit off of it, so it just worked out fantastic for everybody. The doctors wanted the kickbacks. You guys wanted to make your money and push your drugs. So everybody was happy except for, us, the everyday American, that are 20 million less and counting. 100 a day.
Settlement cost Purdue
for over 10
$600
years.
million. Even though a lot of the Sackler family were on the board and Richard Sackler had a direct hand in operations, the Sackler family name appeared nowhere in the 89-page guilty plea. However, the Sackler name did appear on an agreement attached to the plea, which would mean that the government wouldn't go after any of the listed entities related to the Sackler family.
Right.
The company's eagerness to settle was in order to avoid anything going on the public record, especially anything from the Sacklers themselves. The family's only testimony on the topic came in 2015 from Richard. Sealed from public view for 4 years and only released in 2009, The testimony showed that Richard Sackler knew
Thank
about
you,
the
Brooke. I
dangers of
got you.
OxyContin. In 2001, after it was reported that 59 people died from OxyContin overdoses, his email to executives read, "That is not too bad. It could have been far worse."
2,000 people died. Oh, that's not too bad. Crunch the numbers. Send out another 40,000 pills. Just 2,000? Let's pump those rookie numbers up. That's the email that was redacted and sealed from us until 4 years after the 10-year fallout of addiction and death. Purdue
By
pretends to care,
2010,
yes.
Purdue had realized that they need to address the issue facing them. So, they created a new formula for their pill which was harder to snort or inject. After the reformulation, a study was conducted that found a third of users switched to other drugs. And
that's what the neighborhood that I would frequent. There was a certain area of this nice neighborhood outside of the realm of the trailer parks that I lived in, where you turned the corner and you knew the houses, and what we just saw, those people like just kind of nodding in and out of consciousness, were all over the place.
of those, a further 70% began using heroin. It appears that this reformulation simply increased the rate that people turned to cheaper and harder opioids. This was shown by the significant increase in cases post-2010.
Probably everybody started like that.
No,
that's how you're introduced to the drugs, is by pills, and then little by little, it's like your money gets tight and you're just like, well, where can I get something close to this but cheaper? And then it's heroin,
Thank goodness I didn't fall in love with this crap.
Companies do play a big role in.
Purdue's actions went a step further. As the OxyContin patent was nearing its end, Purdue, with an apparent sudden change of heart, stunningly lobbied that the drug was prone to abuse and that no other companies should be allowed to remake it. In 2013, the FDA agreed no generic copies of OxyContin were to be made, but Purdue's version of OxyContin remained on the market.
What
This
sense
simply
does that
meant
make?
That no other competitors could make their own versions of the drug.
So they get to keep a monopoly and make sure they're the only ones that ever profiteer. I mean, I'm a little torn. I don't want to see more or generic or whatever. I mean, it would just be cheaper. Now I have to wrestle with that. There's nothing right about a monopoly here, though.
So what looked like a rare noble act from Purdue was simply a cunning act to move to secure a few more years of competition-free selling of their billion-dollar baby, OxyContin. With its trail of destruction ruining large sections of the American population, Purdue appears to be moving to other markets. Markets with fewer regulations would be a simple way for the Sacklers to keep milking their cash cow. In 2016, an LA Times investigation into Purdue's child company, Purdue Pharma, suggested that it's gearing up to take on international markets with their drug. In response, US lawmakers wrote a letter to the World Health Organization warning the intents of the company owned by the Sackler family.
They wrote the who?
In 2018, the Sacklers obtained a patent for a drug which is used to treat opioid addiction. Ironically, they might make even more money from the crisis they helped create.
Of course. It always works out that way.
In March 2019, Purdue settled yet another lawsuit. This time, the company agreed to pay $270 million to the state of Oklahoma for its part in the opioid epidemic.
One state?
The Sackler family was not called by name as the defendant. However, perhaps in order to not be called to testify...
Why do they get this special treatment? Why do they not get to be named? Why aren't they publicly lambasted and made an example of? We have run out of the opportunity for our system to make examples of these individuals, starting from your mass unaliver or pew-pewer, God forbid, that goes to schools and that still ends up getting to live out his life in prison, and his premeditated actions, all he ever wanted was to survive and see him grow famous. So from that level all the way up to the elite families that are apparently untouchable and unnamed. Why is it that everything with a wealthy and connected family is redacted? Why are they always protected? Why is it we, the people, the American people, that always suffer the consequences and pay the price? We have a civil suit, our own tax dollars pays the civil suit out. Not them. It's us.
He has voluntarily pledged $75 million to the National Center for Addiction Studies at Oklahoma State University.
I want Purdue. I bet you they got to be involved in Suboxone. You make the illness and then you make the medicine for the illness. It's a perfect snake eating its own tail scam.
The company is currently said to be considering bankruptcy in the midst of thousands of lawsuits in order to protect their assets. In total, a separate collection of about 1,600 lawsuits are being carried out from various levels of government. The Sackler name was kept far away from their products, and OxyContin wasn't called Oxy-Sackler on purpose. But now the world is waking up.
Yeah, give me some hope.
We're here to call out the Sackler family who've become synonymous with the opioid crisis. The family who made billions off the bodies of hundreds of thousands.
Protesters have began assembling and organizing against the Sacklers. In February 2019,
nothing
the
has
Guggenheim
happened.
Museum in New York, a common recipient of Sackler money, was taken over by protesters. Prescription papers fell from the balconies.
I saw this live.
Symbolically, as carelessly as doctors on the Sackler payroll once wrote them. The chant, "Shame on Sackler," echoed throughout the streets of New York as angry groups gathered. It now seems that the Sacklers' favorite domain, the art and museum world, has now been overtaken by people who have had enough. In 2019, one by one, art galleries around the world began to reject their work. The National Portrait Gallery in the UK announced that it would be rejecting a $1.3 million donation from the Sackler Trust. London's State Museum and New York's Guggenheim Museum both announced that any further donations from the Sacklers will not be accepted. This
is not a mainstream media outlet by far, but I noticed the music is getting a little bit more, optimistic and crescendoing, and they're like, oh, now look, they're rejecting their donations and their names aren't there. Is this supposed to be a fluff piece to make me feel better about everything that was done? This hardly even touches the mass damage and death that it wrought. I had a friend that was so deep into addiction, wanted out, and he couldn't. He tried his best and he couldn't. And I remember, somewhat of a trigger warning here, he didn't have the courage to completely unalive, and so he had put a belt around his neck, tightened it up, and he was on the ceiling fan. The ceiling fan fell, and so he tied it up to a doorknob, and this is where I walked in. The garage opened, I walked in, and he's just on his knees are like this far from the ground, and he's just holding onto the belt, and he doesn't have enough height from the ground to have his breathing cut. And he shared with me that was his most pathetic feeling moment, and he cried. He's still with us. He went homeless quite a few times. I wonder how he's doing.
As far as outrage against the Sacklers goes, the deeper story is more nuanced. Most of the Sackler descendants are involved in philanthropic work, organizing various charities and well-meaning causes. Some have never owned any shares in Purdue but bear the Sackler name. Should the descendants, some of whom have no interaction with Purdue apart from collecting their checks, which some estimates put as high as $1 billion per year, be held accountable? The publication, The New Yorker, puts forward a good argument that the money received from ill gains should go to measures to counter the impact that they had. For example, John D. Rockefeller founded Standard Oil, which was later broken up into massive oil companies such as Chevron, ExxonMobil, and BP. The descendants of Rockefeller have used some of their fortune to fund resources involved in climate change and audit the company's harms due to their enormous moral responsibility.
This is not building any optimism in me.
The last of the three original Sackler
let's
brothers
compare
who started
ourselves
the
to
company
the
back in the
Rockefellers.
1950s died in 2017. However, Richard, who ran the Purdue Company, and other Sackler members who have served on the board are still alive and being sued.
Final thoughts? Biography. Screw your final thoughts. I have some articles that I want to read that I haven't read. All right. So of course, okay. Here's a clip that I know I can play, and I've never seen it. This is from Al Jazeera English. I think is that Richard Sackler or a lawyer representative? I don't know. I'm gonna watch for the first time. Truly sorry, U.S. opioid makers apologize for role in addiction. You only killed 20 million, so a little sorry from somebody that's not even in the family. Sounds perfect. Let's hear it for the first time.
That I'm aware of any family in America.
Speak up, son.
That's more evil than yours.
Some members of Congress didn't mince words
There we
toward
go.
David and Kathy Sackler, cousins and former board members of Purdue Pharma, the company whose OxyContin pill helped to fuel the opioid epidemic that's claimed the lives of nearly 500,000
This is brief.
Americans.
I want to hear the
The two Sacklers...
This is the woman, co-founder, right here. I forget her name. She was asked to apologize. She refused. I felt I didn't do anything wrong.
...declined to take responsibility for their family's role in the crisis.
There's nothing that I can find that I would have done differently based on what I believed and understood then.
Well, I believe I conducted myself legally and ethically, and I believe the full record will demonstrate that. I still feel absolutely terrible.
Last month, Purdue Pharma pled guilty to 3 felonies, including paying doctors to overprescribe OxyContin and defrauding investigators.
How is that not enough to get, like, a triple frickin' felony? Like, these are just different rules. We're so disconnected, disenfranchised because of this different world that we don't live in.
The Sackler family walked away without criminal charges, but agreed to give up ownership of the company and pay $225 million in civil penalties. That's only
$10 billion net worth. That's a drop in the bucket, in the ocean.
2% of the Sacklers' net worth.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Purdue Pharma is now pursuing bankruptcy protections that could shield it from paying out billions to victims.
I'm just sick to see what it appears to me as a family and a company that's going to use the bankruptcy process to get out of this and to continue to be one of the wealthiest families in America.
While the federal...
That was from a Republican. Just saying. I am on neither side. I just like pointing it out.
Case against the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma is settled. Nearly every U.S. state has filed its own lawsuit, and the House Oversight Committee continues its investigation with bipartisan support. Families of young people who died of overdoses shared their stories.
The damage and the pain and the grief is lifelong, and Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers need to be held accountable for what they've done to our family and countless other families.
The Sackler family got to see all of the testimony, and they didn't say a damn thing.
Many documents show the Sacklers pushed to drive up OxyContin sales while knowing of the drug's potential.
Old story. Old story, different outlet. All right, let me see. I looked for the most recent update that I could possibly find. Okay, this is the one about the this is very recent, and this one, back to 2021, they win immunity from the lawsuits. I think the title says it all. This one, though, let me see this. I read a portion. For the first time during the long legal reckoning over the opioid crisis, members of the Sackler family who own Purdue Pharma heard directly from people who say their companies made product OxyContin wrecked their lives and ended them. David Sackler, Richard Sackler, and Teresa Sackler listened and watched during the roughly 2-hour-long hearing as people described surviving addiction and spoke of losing loved ones to the epidemic. The Sacklers spoke briefly to confirm their presence. That's all they did. They said, here, present. That's the extent of their conversation, but did not respond to the testimony. You created so much loss for so many people, said Kay Scarpone, whose son Joe Scarpone, a retired Marine, died from an opiate overdose. I'm not sure how you live every day. I hope you ask for God's forgiveness for your actions. May God have mercy on your souls. Scarpone says that's somebody with far more grace than I have in my pinky. Many of the people who testified held up photographs of dead loved ones. As a physician and mother, I have been consumed with grief, said Dr. Kimberly Blake, whose son Sean died of an overdose. In 2020, I was hospitalized with depression because I couldn't face another Mother's Day without him, she said. Roughly 500,000 people in the U.S. have died from opioid overdoses since the opioid crisis began in '99, including prescription painkillers and street drugs such as H and illicit fentanyl, which is all the rage here in Florida. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the virtual hearing, was held in federal bankruptcy court as the request of the mediator who hashed out a deal with members of the Sackler family who are expected to pay roughly $6 billion in exchange for immunity from future opioid lawsuits. Not a single one of them is going to get a cuff on their wrists. Nope, just the small potatoes and fries. The big papa and mama potatoes, they're good. They're good. And they're going to get immunities, so they can't be hit again. Judge Robert Drain, who presided over the hearing from his courtroom in White Plains, New York, noted that the Sacklers agreed voluntarily to take part. Oh, how kind of you to take part. It's like agreeing to go to your friend's funeral and getting a pat on the back. This was the first and only formal opportunity during Purdue Pharma's lengthy bankruptcy proceeding for victims to address the company's owners directly. Drain cautioned this wasn't an evidentiary hearing where personal statements should be taken as fact. He also urged those taking part to avoid creating a denunciation rally. But at times the statements directed at members of the Sackler family were searing. I am not a vindictive person, but what you did is criminal, said Stephanie Lubinsky, who lost her husband to an overdose. You made an insane amount of money off our family, more money than you could ever spend. Holding up her husband's photograph, she said, you will know his name, Troy Allen Lubinsky. The Sacklers do not respond and offer no apology. David and Teresa Sackler could be seen on screen during the Zoom session, showing no visible emotion or expression. Richard Sackler was not in view. Drain has signaled that he expects to approve this bankruptcy deal after 9 states dropped their opposition. What would compel entire states to out-of-court settlements, NDAs, and less public scrutiny? The system serves so good. If that happens, the Sacklers will emerge with a clean legal slate, achieving what their attorneys have described as global peace from any liability for the opioid crisis. In the past, the Sackler family has repeatedly voiced regret. Yeah, I heard their regret. On record, it will reflect that I did everything I thought was right. 2,000 people died. That was nothing. Pump those rookie numbers up. This is a bonus time now. We got over $40,000 in bonus incentives about the impact of OxyContin, but they have not apologized to this day. Here's a look at some of the many victims. I got a few pictures myself. You know what? I keep on reading this and it's just going to be the same shit. It's going to be more information that makes me feel disenfranchised, disconnected, and unpatriotic. Let me do this cheesy thing. Hold on. I'm going to get something. Let me flip this. I was hoping that article would have something of value. Done this before. I wish I had all the pictures of all the friends. Alright. This is my friend Zach. And he's gone from an OD. This was 8 months ago maybe. And this is a woman that I wish I would have told her that I was in love with her and I wanted to take her away. This is the woman that I was looking at the stars with for 6 hours, fresh out of rehab, stars in her eyes, every hope in the world. Her daughter, her family was getting all fixed up, mended, and then her future husband-to-be, her fiance, died right in front of her in the bathroom. And she was getting better. She really was. And that's Lindsay, and I miss her every damn day. I have a picture of Lindsay and I. Every time I'm on this desktop, it's at the top. It's titled D-Rad, which was a stupid name that we made as in our high school years. And it stands for drunk ass R. I can't say the R word, but you know what the R word means. Always effed up. And we were clearly terrible at acronyms. I can't really enlarge this photo, so bear with me. But here's Lindsay and I together. That's all I have. And we were both out of our minds. I was a very different person then than I am now. And I made it and she did not. And I always wonder if I would have told her how I felt, if things would have played out differently. I made the mistake of getting very angry with one of her baby daddies, who was a close friend of mine for many years. And he did this to two lady friends of mine. Just, impregnated them and left. And you know who you are if you ever see this. I hear you're still trying to be a SoundCloud rapper, and you're still unemployed, and you've skipped every single child support payment ever for the two daughters you left behind with two different women. And shame on you, you son of a bitch. I don't know how you live with yourself. I've heard you got kicked out of the place you stayed with our old mutual buddy for over a decade, and you never paid for anything. All you did was smoke your fucking pot. That's all you ever did. What have you done? And no justice. Justice for just us. Because the system has failed us. Alright, well, I hate when I think about Lindsay like this, and I get really upset. I had another friend. He got involved and totally addicted, and he also became somewhat of a dealer himself. And I don't know if he was dealing at this time, but he was in the house with his girlfriend, and there was a dealer that drove on his motorcycle, banged on his door at 4 o'clock in the morning with his frickin' bike helmet on, and my friend went out there, and I believe my friend's girlfriend told him this guy's, trouble. So my friend A, we'll call him, went out there and beat the shit out of this guy and had an empty pistol. Empty. Guy doesn't know this. And he beats this dude's head in and breaks that helmet. But he beats him pretty good. And my buddy turns around, walks away, and leaves the guy on the floor. While my friend A's back is turned, the guy that he beat. And technically, that was a bit of a stand your ground, I suppose. Maybe it was a little excessive, I don't know. The guy pulled out his own and pulled the trigger and hit my boy in the back, and he spun around. And he hit him again. And he was down. I've lost track of how many friends I've lost like this that get coup de grace here. And the guy walked over him. He was no longer a threat, and he ended it all right there. The guy that did this, the dealer, he was facing life, but the last information I had gotten when I was still in touch with my friend's cousin informed me that all the charges were dropped. There's video footage of this. I think I've lost about 20 people to addiction in some shape or form, and unaliving. I don't know, it's really hard to keep track. Out of the maybe 60 amazing friends I had for so many years, there's only like 8 of us left. There's a song that reminds me of all of this loss and all the potential. And it's The Offspring, The Kids Aren't Alright. How does it go? Check out the song and you'll understand. I recommend Dope Sick on Hulu if it's still there. It's a very deep, insightful look at how the Sackler family and Purdue started and how they targeted small towns that were known for working hard and doing labor and getting hurt. And they ended families. They ended generations. I don't care if there's a strike here. This was nothing short of some sort of an organized Holocaust of sorts, because we lost so many people, so many good people, and we became people that were not ourselves. And I think of all these people that are gone a lot. Where's the justice when we know we've all been so wronged? Where is the justice when we deserve it? Aren't we entitled to that much as American citizens? This is the country, you play by the rules, you do what's right, you go to work, and you get your just desserts, right? I'm not wording this accurately, but it's supposed to go a certain way. We're programmed and indoctrinated to believe in everything about this country, and every time I look for an example of people that are in a position of privilege, wealth, status, I never see justice. Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, the Clintons, I know YouTube, I know. The Rockefellers, the Sacklers, the Waltons. This is known as the 1% amongst the progressives. This is known as the swamp within the MAGA Republican Party. We all have a name for it, but it's all the same piece of shit. And it appears that pieces of shit thrive in the United States of America. And we're the ones that are going to have to clean it up. I don't know that I have it in me to give the appropriate progressive patriot out, find the things that unify us, so we can stare at problems like this that we know are just so wrong and have done so much damage and nothing gets done. They were trying to give this to our children, approved for 11 years old. The Sacklers were working on getting it approved for 9-year-olds. We got to be the checks and balances because it ain't getting done for us. All right, I'm going to go. Thank you.